Right. So this 80 series has been in service for about 5 years. You can see it's pretty covered with gunk and schmeg. They'll probably polish up, clean up alright, you know. It's all dirty, Bertie. But yeah, worked pretty well for 5 years. Max oversaw out of it was about 720, 740 watts at about 1000 RPM. Oh, old mate Bridgie though, he doesn't look so good. Might have exhibited a bit too much torque on those rusted bolts and have torn that asunder. She's broke, man. That's not going back in. Anyway, I've replaced it with this. A little light on the subject. So this is a 36 pole copper stator, and when used in conjunction with a black cap rotor you get 1 watt per RPM. The old 80 style would do about 0.75 of a watt per RPM, so that's what I was doing, you know, nearly 750 watts at 1000 RPM. So this guy I've installed yesterday, same as this fella, 700 watts should give me 700 RPM, or vice versa. And yeah, relatively simple wiring compared to some of them that I've done. I got this from the back shed. There's a whole bunch of different diagrams and information over there. Strongly recommend you check that out. So this guy's a 2 in series, 6 in parallel, star configuration. I could have gone for more power, but it goes into delta territory, which gets a little bit more complicated. And as this was just a let's install it and see what happens, I didn't bother with that. So yeah, this is how I've got it working. I've got a slew of midnite controllers over here. So these guys, these 3 midnite kids, are all synced up together so that they communicate with one another. You can see the M there next to float. That's master kid, and then we've got S for slave and S for slave. So these two are solar work. They've got their own separate solar arrays, and this guy's working with the hydro. Yeah, previous iterations, previous firmware, there was some glitchy sort of behavior where they wouldn't communicate. Like this guy would be cranking out the amps in bulk and this guy would be resting, and all sorts of weird stuff was happening. But this latest firmware seems to have fixed most of those problems. I mean, these are a very capable controller. They've got a lot of functionality. I'm pretty happy with them actually, and few little weird things, like initially these didn't come with this expanded sort of enclosure. The enclosure was only this sort of size, and they are a bit of a bitch to get the cables into the back. There's another panel that you have to take off as well. So this later iteration, they've got this expanded board with an extension sort of all the main, you know, you got your solar input, your load output and your battery output, and then you just bang your cables in there. Whereas previously you were trying to go up through these little, where there's 2 little holes in there, and then you had to go in behind, and yeah, it was just a bit of a hassle. Where if you've got the classics, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 screws on the front, you pull that back, disconnect your Ethernet cable, the whole front panel is gone and you've got access to everything. They're very, very easy to set up. But yeah, with the exception of that sort of fiddliness, they're actually a really good controller, and they incorporate a load circuit that will handle up to 30 amps. Whereas with these guys, you need like an external relay, an SSR or something like that. So yeah, there's a bit of functionality there. Yeah, other than that, I think I'll just tell you about how I'm doing this with the hydro. So they're a multi-power point tracking mppt 30 amp charge controller. So we're on 48 volts. That means these guys will do 1500 watts each. They have a voltage ceiling. VOC is 150 volts. So we can't go over 150 volts, but that stator definitely could go over 150 volts. So you need some sort of protection. And what I've used is this thing here called the Clampet, which is an over voltage crowbar. This one's 140 volts. It seems to fire off at about 138, 139 volts, bang. And it shorts the windings together, and the turbine essentially comes to a standstill. So that protects the kid from seeing more than 140 volts, which is within its 150 volt threshold. So that seems to work really well. Yeah, but the problem is, in order to use the latest firmware where the 3 kids in sync talk to one another, you don't get any hydro on the input. So you'll see if we go into the input menu, you've got solar, solar 2, observe and perturb, and you've got USET VOC and nothing else. That's all you've got. And turn that back on. So because basically the current iteration of the kid is not supported for wind or hydro. Initial advertising blurb, yes, the kid will do wind and hydro. They have not released their clipper. It's being built. I've seen pictures of it, yada yada yada. We don't have access to it on the market. It's not for sale. I needed to do something because I needed to implement this system now. So this has been my workaround and I'm very happy with it. It seems to be working quite well. The problem is, so we're using USET VOC. We'll go into load, input, there we are. So you go into USET VOC and you go to setup. So the percentage of the open circuit, the voltage of the open circuit. So it's basically a percentage of whatever your input is. I haven't found that changing that percentage is giving me much. I mean, I only had a brief play with this yesterday because we haven't got any water in the creek again today, so it was just, I had to go while we had some water there, and you know, it seemed to work pretty well. This guy was putting out about 125, 130 watts, where with the same jet and the PWM controller it would make around, you know, 20 watts less than that, 15, 20 watts less than that. So there's definitely an improvement in performance with having this guy in the system. And then I left it running overnight, woke up this morning and the clamper had fired off and was clamping the turbine. Now I'm not sure if that's because the water level in the creek, because I was watching the wattage later into the night and the wattage was going down. I knew we were going to run out of water. I'm not sure if, yeah, a slug of water came down, fired it back up fast. I don't know. Until I've got more water, I can't actively say. Yeah, but basically I tried it in the solar and the solar observe and perturb modes, and yeah, when they do their sweep, that's it. You know, it unloads the turbine, clamp it goes bang, locks the turbine up, it's all over. So at this stage this looks like it's going to work for me, which is great. But I'm hoping that Midnite will release some software. I mean, I understand why they haven't, firmware I should say, why they haven't got firmware that'll do it, because they're trying to protect their investment. They don't want a million people hooking up a hydro turbine to something that's only designed for 150 volts without protection. I mean, they're going to have warranty claims here, there and everywhere. I can understand that. But yeah, for those of us that know how to do it, yeah, come on guys, I need this thing. So yeah, anyway, that's pretty much them in a nutshell. We'll have to come back when I've got some water and do a bit more testing. But yeah, basically these guys seem to work really well in conjunction with one another. They're all floating at the moment, so you can see, you know, 185 watts on that array, 370 on that array, and that's because I've got this guy doing PWM diversion. You see the little blue light coming on there. We go to the main screen and just pan across, and you can see the diversion happening there. How's that camera angle? Can you see? Yeah. So it just sort of comes up and down, and as is necessary. Towards the end of the day where there's less solar obviously and no hydro happening, it'll just keep bouncing up and down. But when it's in the middle of the day, it's pretty much on constantly. There is no PWMing, it's just sort of constantly on, and it seems to work really well. It works quite differently to the previous PWM controller I had, which would sort of numerically come up in value and then hover, whereas this guy seems to clock out. He just comes all the way up and then bounces back down. So, but yeah, hey, it works fine. Yeah, that's probably pretty much it. If you're interested in doing this sort of thing, it is possible. They will work in sync mode together. Yep, there you go. That's me, Midnite Kids, mppt, hydro, over and out.